to today's episode of Developing Your Football Podcast. Our guest is Paul Barry. He's a lot of things, very interesting is one of them, so you're going to enjoy this a lot. So Paul, thank you very much for coming on and joining us. It's great that you've given up some of your time so we can learn from your experiences and your journey.
Yeah, thanks, Will. Thanks for inviting me on. Really appreciate your support.
So what we're going to do is go through your journey as a coach and what you've learned from that, and hopefully the audience can learn a lot from that, particularly as you spent some time working at Arsenal, which we'll get to later on. But that is a destination a lot of people would like to end up. So you started working as a personal trainer.
Yeah.
And you mentioned in the article how it has benefited you for football and for coaching. What was it that appealed to you about personal training in the first place?
Yeah, I think my background going through school, GCSE, A-level, was very fitness and sport orientated. I was a keen athlete and footballer as a young person, represented my school, my county, was a keen middle distance runner. 1500 metres was my distance, and always ran and kept fit, enjoyed the gym, played football to a fairly decent level. So it just made sense, I think, following my passion and interests, to want to pursue a career that matched my knowledge and my passion and my experience. So a few friends of mine when I was at university were going through similar sort of qualifications, gym instructor level 2 to personal training level 3, to coincide with their sports science degree. And it just made sense for me to do the same. So I used to come back at weekends and work in my local health club, or a health club just down the road to where I live in Essex, just to sort of get some experience, really. So not a lot of work during my time at university. I used to come home, do some voluntary grassroots coaching whilst I was going through my level 2. And then that was in the mornings on Saturdays, for example. Then I'd go off and do a shift at the health club. So that was more gym instructor based, delivering gym inductions for clients, writing their programs, trying to tailor the programs to meet their objectives and their goals that they wanted to achieve. And that then progressed into personal training and group fitness training. So I was probably as busy with the group fitness work as I was with the one-to-one work. And then I started to branch out and work in different gyms and health clubs as well. So it's sort of built from there, really.
What kind of clients did you work with?
Whole vast array of different clients, ranging from those that were wanting to achieve quite significant weight loss, to those that wanted to tone up and get the beach body, the ones that come to you around about March, April, and they're the ones that want a six-pack by May generally, or a little bit sooner. So really sort of a diverse range of clients. Had some athletes, some runners, some footballers, those involved in martial arts. I used to do boxing, boxercise type sessions, so those that were keen boxers and mixed martial artists. So right from opposite ends of the spectrum to those that had never stepped foot in a gym and you're trying to explain how the start button works on a treadmill, to those that were doing very complex lifts like Olympic lifts. So that really taxes you and challenges you as a personal trainer. But I think that's part of the beauty of that sort of role, that it's no 2 days are the same as each other and no 2 clients are the same. So it's about quite a diverse job, and it does challenge you in different ways.
What to ask, because I'm sure a lot of people will be curious, but with a lot of lockdowns that we've been having lately, maybe many people out there aren't as fit as they used to be. Just so I can be aware, how long would it take to get a six-pack? I've got a holiday in a month and I need to get started.
Well, do you know what? For me, a six-pack is built in the kitchen, not in the gym. That's a little catchphrase of mine I like. So many people think that crunch after crunch and all these different types of sit-ups are what's going to carve out a six-pack, but there's no point in doing all that stuff if your diet's not up to scratch as well. And some experts say that getting fit and achieving your fitness goals, like getting a six-pack, is 80% nutrition. So you've got to be well versed in what's good for your body and what nutrients to take in and in what quantities, I think, as well as how hard you work in the gym. So yeah, difficult one to answer really, Will. I think it's dependent upon everyone's body shape and their genetics a little bit as well. But everyone's definitely got a six-pack. It's in there somewhere. Some have just got to carve away some of the you know, the muscle, the fat that sits in front of it, you know.
Fair enough. I'll start doing my sit-ups in the kitchen and see if that has any effect.
Yeah.
Now, because you were working with such a diverse range of clients and their needs, what did you do in the meantime to expand your knowledge and almost kind of stay ahead of the needs of their clients?
Yeah, the gyms that I've worked at, the staff training's always been really, really good. So I'm not too sure how knowledgeable you are in the types of fitness trends that obviously when I was working in gyms were quite prevalent at the time. So group fitness was quite a big thing. There was a concept called Les Mills training. So you had like your body pump training, your RPM indoor cycling. There were various body attack, which was quite a high tempo plyometrics type session. So there's always these courses, whether they were weekends or over, you know, several weekends, to go and upskill yourself and learn a new type of group fitness or one-to-one sort of training product. And there was always these, as I say, these were quite prevalent in the fitness industry at the time, and they kept you ahead of the game a little bit. And they were all marketed really, really nicely and promoted really, really well with colourful banners. And we used to do like induction days for these concepts and roll them out every sort of 3 or 4 months when there was like a new, they used to bring out new CDs with new music on, and a lot of the classes were choreographed to the music. So it was quite motivating, and the clients really, really loved it, whether that was one-to-one or in a small or large group fitness setting. So that was how I sort of kept ahead of the game, because the CPD was always very, very good.
So what kind of music do you think is best to work out to? What's on your playlist?
Well, I'm a keen runner still, so I try and run 2 or 3 mornings a week, and I go out really, really early before everyone wakes up near enough and before the roads get too busy, or run around the river when it's nice and fresh in the morning. So I'm more of a podcast listener, I think, when I go out running. If I'm going out for a long run, I think an audio book or a good podcast, whether that's a football one or a psychology one or just a generic sport one, they're nice to listen to. If it's a shorter run, which might be like a 4 or 5K run, a bit quicker, you know, something with a good beat to it, like the Prodigy, Chemical Brothers, that sort of stuff that's quite quick and quite motivating. So yeah, I think it depends on the sort of run that you're going on really, and what sort of exercise you're doing.
Some of the podcasts and audio books, I'm not great for long distance cardio. And if I was listening to something really good, it would almost make me want to continue because, oh crap, I'll finish, but they're still talking. It's really interesting. So we had a dad in Mexico, an English guy, who was really into kind of long distance training. He listened to Coldplay, which I found quite odd, because that would seem like the opposite of what you would want to listen to if you're trying to push yourself and perform.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
I suppose
admit,
we're all different.
Coldplay and Oasis are probably my 2 favourite ever bands. But they're the sort of music I listen to when I'm in the car, I'd say, more than when I'm out running. Oasis, I think, is all right for going out and running and training. Coldplay, not so much, but Coldplay is an ever-present when I'm driving because it's more relaxing and tempo's a lot slower. But yeah, I think it depends on your preference, really, doesn't it?
I used to listen to Black Sabbath before playing in my church league, and that would somehow pump me up probably a little bit too much. When I got War Pigs being blasted, and suddenly I'm getting out of the car hating the government because they keep sending us to war. And so, no, mate, this is just a friendly league. Calm down. And it
flying into those tackles in the first 10 minutes, I bet, weren't you?
Yes. Sometimes in the warm-up too.
Injuring your teammates.
Yeah, as Wayne Rooney has been doing recently.
Yeah, I've been reading about that. Yeah.
So
I don't think his mindset's changed from player to manager just yet. I think he's still in his mind perhaps thinks he's a player. He was a heck of a player, to be fair, wasn't
he? Maybe it's ruthless. Perhaps he's showing the level he expects in training by injuring his own teammates.
Yeah. Role modelling, perhaps to an even greater degree.
Well, precisely, because we train how we play how we train. That's it. So if you're going to pull out the tackles in training, perhaps you'll be in condition to pull out the tackles when it really counts.
Yeah. It's one thing pulling out the tackle to a teammate, it's another thing pulling out the tackle to your gaffer who's flying in studs first, isn't it?
At least it wasn't a kid. I'm sure, not me, obviously, but a lot of people out there have shanked the ball in practice and hit a kid in the face. And of course,
lost count that time we've done that.
So how did you go into football coaching? What were your first steps?
Yeah, so the personal training and gym instructor sort of time when I was younger, it always coincided with football as well. More so sort of voluntary work, and I volunteered at my local grassroots club for about 4 years. So that was, as I said, Saturday mornings, during half terms and summer holidays. I'd offer my time to go and do their summer camps. And as I got a little bit older and more experienced, and people got to know me at the club, I was given more responsibility. I was the head coach at their summer camps for a couple of years running. So I was treated really, really well, but it was just getting experience. It wasn't a case of this is going to be something that I can earn any great money from. So as I got a little bit older, into my sort of early to mid 20s, it was a case of branching out into local football in the community schemes. I did some work for Tottenham football in the community. I was part of a Brazilian soccer schools franchise for some time with a friend, and was doing like PPA work in schools and after school clubs in and around Chelmsford. So that was pretty much how I progressed my football coaching knowledge. Minimal hours, but it was always linked to personal training and my health club work, really. I'd say my first real big break into full-time football was working for the FA when they rolled out the skills program in 2007. So up to that point, I'd been upskilling myself with various courses. I went through the FA Fitness Trainers Award in 2004, which was a brilliant 2-year course, one that's not actually part of the FA learning pathway anymore. Unfortunate for me, really. It's one of the best courses I've ever done, but it linked brilliantly football to fitness. It was all about fitness adaptations, fitness testing, generating programs for individuals and clubs. So when I went into working with the FA, I had a good football coaching knowledge behind me, having obtained my level 2, and I was going through my UEFA B at the same sort of time, and had a really good fitness and sport science background as well. So that was my first full-time role, back in 2007, working for the FA in the skills program.
When did you realise that football could become a career rather than kind of a part-time hobby?
Yeah, I'd say it was then, really, because despite it not being an advanced or more like elite environment, if you like, we weren't working with academy level players. It was a community-based scheme. So similar to the work that I'd done previously, but in a full-time capacity. So I was working in schools in the day, delivering football and sports specific PE lessons, helping the teachers, almost mentoring the teachers, because mostly primary teachers, they get a lot of training in all the other subjects they have to deliver to their young pupils, but PE often falls by the wayside a little bit. So we'd go in there with good knowledge, and we'd help with their writing the PE curriculum, doing after school clubs, doing evening skills centres. A large part of the job was really enjoyable, was linking into local grassroots clubs and building those club support links with grassroots coaches, and then going in and doing coach education over like a 6-week period, working with their players as well. So they were slightly more intentional players that were they were playing for the club. So they were training in the week and playing games on Saturday mornings or on Sundays. So that became more of a mentoring sort of aspect to the role as well. And so I was enjoying working with the players, and equally enjoying working with the teachers and the coaches and supporting their education as well. So that's when I started to realise this, for me, could become a full-time career, either at this level or beyond it, which is what I've moved to, obviously, in several years later.
So I got a few different questions here on different subjects from what you said. So you worked a lot in primary schools. Now every school is different, every kid is different, so not all environments are the same. And I've spent the last year working in a primary school, and I've now got a lot of opinions on what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong. And perhaps anyone that listens to me might think I'm like the old man yelling at the cloud, but I'd like to get some of your opinions on this stuff. Well, maybe this one's a bit easy to begin with. Do you think we're treating sport and physical activity seriously enough in primary schools?
I'd say the short answer is definitely not. If I talk about the close hand experience I've got 2 young daughters, one that's just left primary school and is in year 7, one that's in year 2 going into year 3. So I've lived the primary school lifestyle through my 2 daughters over the last 6-7 years or so. PE for me from what I hear from them and speaking to other parents, isn't treated in the same way as perhaps some of the other subjects that they do, like their maths, their core subjects. And I understand that maths, science, English, they're core subjects. They're critical to a young person's learning. But I don't see why PE should be treated any different. For me, PE should be part of that because it's to do with their health, their appreciation of their health, how to keep fit, how to stay active, learning to love different sports, and learning all the fitness elements that are required in different sports, like speed, endurance, balance, agility, coordination. So it should be, for me, treated in the same way that those core subjects are. And then when it comes around to the summer and they do their sports days, for example, that's even if the sports days run, as they have perhaps not so much done in the last 2 years, for example. But even when they have been done, they're often what they term and deem non-competitive, for example. And so the kids will go around all these different stations, and there's no outcome as such at the end, and it's all very much participation based. And I get it, I do get it. There are positives for that, and trying to generate interest and participation in sport. But ultimately, young people still have to learn how to win and how to lose properly, and the life lessons you learn from both of those. I don't think a sports day and PE should be any different to that. You know, there's going to be in a group of 30 children, the top 5 mathematicians and the bottom 5 that struggle. So I don't think PE and sports days, for example, should be any different to that. And I think you do the ones that are going to excel in PE and sports days a bit of a disservice when they're not treated in the same way that perhaps the other subjects are.
So I went to a very strict private school growing up, and my best subjects were sport and music. And yet, even though they were GCSEs that were weighted just the same as English and maths, if I did anything wrong, then PE or music was the punishment. That was taken away. So you wouldn't take away science from me or geography. Why are you taking this away? It's a subject. And I find that we're still in that kind of mindset. Now, I was listening to a podcast a couple of weeks ago where they're talking about PE, and I wish I remember who it was because I could give them credit because it was really good. And the guy made the point that, so what do we think of for PE and school sport and grassroots sport in general? What are the aims and objectives? And they went off on a long list from everything from communication skills, social skills, motor skills, nutrition, health, fitness, dealing with defeat, with following orders, with giving orders. And it was so much, mostly around holistic development. And there were 2 main questions to that. One was, what other subject has that much weight placed on it? Right? You go to maths to learn how to add and subtract numbers. You go to English to learn, well, if it's English language, it's more about grammar and your syntax. But no one's thinking, well, we've got to do English today because it's going to help the kids with their skills in life. It will help them become well-rounded people.
Yeah.
But for PE, school sport, grassroots sport, we think that about it. Now, I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but that is the perception. So, number 2, if that is the perception of the value of sport and what it can teach, why the hell are we not treating it more seriously? If we think it's this magic pill that can teach everything that we fail to teach the kids at home or in the classroom, then why are we half-assing PE? Why are we treating it as a DOS? Why is it that we're not educating people to know how to do it properly? And I think that's quite interesting. So either we have to narrow the scope of what PE and sport in general for kids actually is, or we have to treat it way, way more seriously. But perhaps you might have a lot of thoughts on this, but I still think in this country, we look down on sport as a career, as a profession, and it's very easy to look. We have a serious hooligan problem in this country. We have a lot of idiots out there, and I saw a lot of them firsthand on that fateful night at Wembley, and also when I went to the Germany game too. But I also think that sport, well, people within sport become kind of like a scapegoat for the rest of our problems. So it can be, oh, don't worry, that was just a bunch of football thugs, like they're some kind of separate species. Sport reflects society, and society reflects sport, and society can be driven by sport. So if sport can be that magic pill, that cure-all that any deficit my kid has, I can teach them the value of life through sport. Why is it most kids are doing 1 or 2 lessons a week? Why is it we're cutting funding left, right, and centre? Why is it that the vast majority of teachers think that PE is a DOS?
It's a really good question. I mean, I think I totally agree with you. I think sport is a huge metaphor for life and the life skills you can learn through participating in sport. I think perhaps the way that schools approach sport is they perhaps look at the obvious skills that you learn. So some of the things we just said, like some of the fitness adaptations, some of the physical literacy and the motor skills you can learn, and perhaps they don't put as much value on those as they do on the theoretical subjects that they learn in the classroom, like we've mentioned. But it's not just the physical and physiological skills and benefits you learn and gain from sport. It's all the life skills. It's all the psychological and mental skills you learn as well, like resilience and grit, and learning to deal with mistakes and coping with pressure, and being humble when you win and succeed in sport. They're all psychological mindset attributes that you can learn to a massive degree. And I think if schools put as much value on those life skills, like you say, I think perhaps that the PE program would be more beneficial, more comprehensive. So it's not just what physical and physiological gains you get for the body, it's the huge mindset positive benefits, for me anyway, that I learned when I went through my PE sort of pathway, and I want my daughters to experience as well. They need to learn how to lose, they need to learn how to cope with the pressure, and they need to be humble when they win. And I think sport, as I say, is a metaphor for life, and they're the main skills that I put value on when I think about participating in exercising in sport.
So to kind of take a sideways step, the other avenue I want to go down was, you've mentioned mentoring. What kind of mentoring? Who were you mentoring? What were you helping them with?
Yeah, so mentoring was a quite, as I say, significant part of working for the FA. So I in my second year and going into my third year, I went through my tutor training, my generic FA tutor training, and I specialised in futsal. So I would go and deliver futsal courses for grassroots coaches, and then spend time with them with their clubs. So that might be, obviously from a futsal point of view, I'd go and work with them in their indoor facility delivering futsal, but I'd also go and spend some time with them out on the grass delivering football sessions as well. So these are guys that are perhaps fresh out of their level ones, super keen, knowledge of the game might be quite restricted, they might even still be playing, so they might have an idea about tactics and strategy from a playing perspective, but coaching is very, very different. It's one thing being well versed in the game as a player. It's a whole different ball game being versed in the game to educate a group of players and to work on your communication skills, your skill when you question players and prompt creativity and learning from them. There's a skill in building a curriculum of work, a syllabus of training, how to plan sessions effectively, how to differentiate within sessions, I always think in a session you can have mainly three types of play. You can have those that struggle, those that cope, and those that strive. So part of the mentoring was how to help coaches differentiate in their session and really stretch and challenge those that are striving, how to set a particular level of challenge for those that cope, so it's just about the right level for them, but almost perhaps at times how to regress the challenge for those that are struggling and to make it achievable for them as well. So I'd say the mentoring was about session design and helping players appropriately within sessions.
I just had flashbacks to probably more than 10 years ago doing an FA age appropriate, I think it was a CPD evening, and it was kind of like an introduction to the youth modules.
Yeah.
And they talked a lot about how you work with kids within the session that are striving, coping, or struggling, and kind of what you can do to kind of balance it out without restricting the good kid. Because if you say you got one player that's dribbling around everyone, smashing in 10 goals, you don't want to punish him for that.
Yeah.
That would be unfair to him. But how can you challenge him without necessarily restricting or constraining? but at the same time, you've got another kid that is really struggling to cope. And this great idea that they presented loads, but one which has stuck with me since was, let's say you're doing a small-sided game, 66, 77, whatever. Put in a couple boxes somewhere within the pitch, kind of about 2 yards by 2 yards, made by flat markers. And you say to the players, anyone who needs a bit more time on the ball can go into one of these boxes, and you got 5 seconds unopposed. So the good player is not going to use it if they don't need to. But the bad player who keeps getting tackled, they're going to take their first touch into the box. They're going to receive passes in the box. They've now got 5 seconds, they can't be tackled. They're looking up, they're finding a pass. And it's kind of like armbands in the pool. We're all still swimming, aren't we? We're all still wet, we're all still splashing around. But some people need just a little bit extra help to stay afloat. And I really liked that. And of course, then went on to do the youth modules shortly after. And I think it kind of, those courses made the basis of who I am as a coach, because I did them quite young. I did them quite early in my coaching career. And I think it's very much shaped how I view football and how I view coaching. So in your role as a mentor.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, yeah, I remember the age appropriate course. It was almost a precursor to the module 1, which was all about developing and setting an appropriate learning environment, a safe and secure learning environment. So what you mentioned there about, we used to call them safe zones, and they used to be in various parts of a pitch, whether it was a small-sided game or a practice of some kind. And you're right, it was really beneficial for the players that needed it, and the ones that were striving perhaps wouldn't need to use it. For those that were struggling in the sessions, it was great, and you could almost promote the idea of their touch, leading them into that particular area, so they had more time and space. But when they became when it became a part of the session where they were almost overusing it for the wrong reasons, again, the skill of the coach was, can you not restrict the number of times they use it, but it could be once you enter that zone, you've got 2 seconds before you've got to leave. Or if you were going to restrict it, it could be within a 4 or 5 minute time frame of a match. You can use that safe zone twice, or you can use it 3 times. So to pick the right time to use it rather than overusing it, perhaps at the wrong times when it wasn't the right moment, and they were already in time and space with minimal pressure on them. So they're great ideas, and that was just about clear and concise and precise session design, wasn't it? And it was, like you say, catering for the different abilities in the group.
But also, it's done in an impersonal way. So most people within a session are aware of the kids that are on the lower end of the ability spectrum. And rather than saying, look, mate, you're crap, so you need this to help you out, you're putting it in a way, anyone, if they feel they need the help, can use this box. So you're not targeting anybody. And it then becomes, it's their choice. So they have the ownership of it. And kids respond much, much better to that, rather than singling them out and saying, you're useless, so you get to take extra touches, you get extra time on the ball. No one can tackle this kid, he's terrible. It's much better. And there was lots of kind of like soft skills around the delivery of different constraints. And I really enjoyed that a lot. So for you as a mentor, what kind of challenges did you face when you were trying to get these ideas across to a lot of the coaches, many whom would never have seen anything like that or never would have even thought that it was possible? It's an idea that they couldn't even conceive. How do you get that across to someone that was struggling?
Yeah, I think you've got to understand and appreciate that not every coach that you work with in a coach education setting or a mentoring program is going to be open-minded. Some are quite fixed mindset and quite closed-minded. That for me is perhaps down to their journey and the way that perhaps they were coached when they were younger, and their beliefs as well. And I'm never going to frown upon that. I'm never going to try and force a particular initiative or a way of coaching or a particular session and practice onto someone if they're unwilling to listen and unwilling to absorb the information. I just try to remain cool and calm and patient with it, really, and just try and advocate the reasons why and the benefits why. And the key word for me in coaching and coach education and mentoring is just consider. I'd never try and, as I say, force concepts onto someone. It would always be, consider this or consider this idea. And the word consider then is, it puts it in their mind, and it puts it's in the ball's in their park then, isn't it? It's up to them whether they take on board and understand and appreciate the idea, or they don't. And that then deflects it from myself. I've done my job. I've tried to promote whatever it is that we're considering within that session or that program, and it's for them to consider whether it's worthwhile them running with it. So I think patience and the right terminology is what you need, and empathy as well. It's understanding their background and their mindset, because you do meet a lot of coaches that still have quite a fixed mindset, I think, in football. And part of our job is to try and help them develop more of a growth mindset. So using the word consider, I think, is a key one.
I had a lot of experience when I was trying to get our coaches in Missouri to understand the curriculum that we had. So it was some of the best stuff I've ever seen. I think this is self-evident. It's that good. How could you not want to do it? And then I'd go around the sessions and see in an hour practice, the typical one you get from the coaches would be, I haven't thought of a session, so I'm going to ask the other coach of a similar age group, hey mate, do you just want to play a mouse tonight? And then they'd get the kids playing, I don't know, perhaps a developmentally inappropriate size game. And so they'd have kids that are doing 9v9 would be playing 10v10 or 11v11. But on top of that, they'd have squads of 16 to 18 players. And then have players sat on the bench during practice. But you've got an hour a week with these kids. Why on earth are you making them sit down? They've been stuck in school all day and they want to run around with their friends. And I would struggle to get through to those people, because they would have the mindset of, well, you need to earn your place. Well, no, they're kids. They've paid money. They want to play football with their friends. You are not the gatekeeper of their childhood. Let them in. And also the idea that the kids could learn from the bench. Shut up. No, they're switched off. And they're not, no, maybe they're learning something from watching, but they'd learn about 100 times more if you give them a ball and get them interacting with the other kids. And so I have not cracked that yet. When I'm in those roles, I don't know, perhaps I'm being cynical. Maybe some people are unreachable, but I can't think like that as a coach. That's because imagine if I took that view to children, that wouldn't be right, would it?
It's not. And like you say, the kids come to our sessions most often, being the case that they've been in school all day, sat down all day. We spoke about school earlier, and the amount of time they spend in the classroom and the little time they do spend outside being active. So who are we to, when they arrive at our session, to keep them sat down? They don't want to. They've got so much energy to burn that I think for the coaches that are inexperienced and less knowledgeable, they can learn their craft over time, and they can go and work on their session design and go and watch other coaches and build a library and a catalogue of sessions. But in the interim period before that, they become knowledgeable enough and confident enough to have this bank of sessions in their mind or pre-planned, I think small-sided games with constraints, particular points scoring systems, particular rules, they're always going to be a winner for kids. So rather than get 20 kids playing an 8v8 and there's several kids, 4 on the side resting, how about you do 3 separate, 3v3 games or whatever the numbers cater for, and smaller pitches. Scenario training, I use a lot with young players in small-sided games. So it could be next 5 minutes, team A, you're 1-0 up. It's the last 5 minutes of the Champions League final. And the other team are going to start with a free kick on the edge of the penalty area. So you set a particular scenario. So straight in their minds, these young players are thinking, those that are on the winning team, right, we've got 5 minutes. How are we going to approach this game sort of tactically? Are we going to, for want of a better word or phrase, park the bus and try and defend very deep and try and hit the opposition on the counter attack? Or are we going to try and high press and be aggressive and try and get a second goal to give us a further advantage in the game? Then you've got the team that are, in this example, 1-0 down. So they've got to go for it. They've got to be more risk-taking and aggressive and adventurous with the ball, and perhaps leave spaces behind in their defensive unit of the pitch. So these are very simple coaching concepts to roll out with kids, and then it's down to them. And then you can get loads of cool coaching done and loads of great questioning but they're owning that session. They're developing the strategies. They're creating the formations and the ideas and the principles of play. So for the coaches that are less experienced, I think, and less knowledgeable, lots of small-sided games rather than bigger games, which means players are then resting, like you said. Constraints, get the kids ideas for points and scoring systems, and use scenario-based training a lot. And that's for players to learn their game insight, their game craft, and know what it takes to hold on to a lead, or to try and claw back a draw, or come back to win a game from being 1 or 2-0 down in a short space of time. I think if you put a scenario on it, World Cup final, FA Cup final, semi-final of the FA Cup, last day of the Premier League, I've done all these types of scenarios, and the kids really, really enjoy them.
I love that kind of stuff. And I remember being introduced to it on one of the youth modules, probably about 2010, 2011. And the example that sticks in my mind is we put in 2 groups, red, blue. Blue, you're Inter Milan. Red, you're Barcelona. And it ended up around about the time that Mourinho and Guardiola were had that great battle in the Champions League. And the coach said to us, blue team, you're going to play like Inter. So we knew within seconds what that meant. And then the red team had to play like Barcelona. So we go out there, we've taken on board those characteristics straight away. And because even as adults, we found this so much fun. And we're happy to park the bus for 10, 15 minutes, because you create a scenario in our heads. We're now fighting for a place in the Champions League final. Right? And so it's used our imagination. It was just brilliant. And they said, right, now you've had a player sent off, but you're 2-0 up. Yeah. So what are you going to do? I said, now we've got to think, haven't we? How are we going to play this? What's the risk and reward associated with it? I remember doing this so I've tried it in lots of different countries, and it's always been interesting to me to see how well the kids of the different countries will take this stuff on. So in Mexico, where they're football crazy, I did it with under 14 girls. We did Barcelona v Real Madrid once. And as soon as I said it, they're off scheming. And in their heads, they were delegating who each player was. And so this one girl who was a winger would stay far left out and hug the touchline. She wanted to be Rakitic. And so now she was playing as a centre midfielder. So she, in the practice game, had now almost conditioned herself to take on a different playing personality. And the teams played their best versions of Real Madrid and Barcelona. And then, of course, you got your half-time when they change their tactics, and then your full-time reflection. But then I tried this in the US, and they don't know football. And so they just kind of know that Messi plays for Barcelona and that Ronaldo might want to play for Real Madrid, but I don't know if he's still there. And does that mean he can still play for Portugal, even though he's now living in Italy? So you get those kind of questions that, right, now I can't necessarily do that kind of scenario with you, but I can still use some of the ideas of it. Like, everyone can relate to 2-0 down in the cup final, or it's 1-1, but if you hold on for the draw, you win the league. Everyone can relate to that kind of stuff. You have to paint those pictures differently. But let's just say then, I am a coach under your mentorship, and I'm looking at this, something, this is completely stupid. All you're doing is playing games with the kids. They're not learning. They can't pass. So you've got to do some passing drills with them. How do you reach me?
Yeah, I think this is that classic unopposed sort of technical practice versus a random game craft practice. I think those practices, that there's still a place for them. There's still a place for drill-like activity or unopposed activity. I just think it's got to be, to a lesser extent and a minimal part, a reduced time frame part of a whole session. I think if you're to try and educate that coach, it would be just to watch really closely, watch the decisions that go on in game realistic sessions, because in those drill type sessions, they're very closed, skill based. They're very command style, with the way that you deliver them as a coach, and they're very constant practices. So they're working on the same skills with no decision making, no problem solving. Of course, you can work on execution in football actions of dribbling, receiving, passing, ball control, but that's nothing to do with making decisions in the game, and you're not randomizing the practice enough. So I would say to a coach like that, just to watch, appreciate the fact that that part of the session is still valid, but it's got to be to a lesser extent than the game. The kids come to your sessions to play football. They don't come to pass from one cone to the next around a particular shape or whatever the case may be. And then for the coach just to ask the kids as well. Ask the kids what they enjoy doing most, where they feel they learn most, because ultimately the sessions are for the kids. They're not for us. They're not for the coaches. We're just there to facilitate, oversee, support, and try and create brilliant and enjoyable learning environments to develop them as players and people. But it's for the kids. So I'd get that coach to go and talk to the group and ask them, do you feel like you're learning? Do you feel like you're developing? And if they're having fun playing games with different constraints and different ideas, and they're owning their practices, I'd say 9 times out of 10, or even more so, the kids are going to give a positive answer to that coach. And that's how I would try and deflect it, more so or less so from my knowledge and my direction, and push that coach in the direction of the kids. Go and learn from the kids. They're the ones that are showcasing what they can do. They're the ones that are learning, and they're more likely going to learn when there's decisions and problems to consider.
So in your article, you used a couple of really good phrases that, that I liked. First one was, persistence drives us and curiosity guides us.
Yeah.
Can you talk about what that means?
Yeah. I am a good friend of mine, or 2 good friends of mine, Keith and David Mayer, do a brilliant podcast called the Gold Dust Podcast. They brought out 2 brilliant books as well. Good friends of mine. And I heard Keith quote this on an episode a few episodes ago. Persistence is a great word. Persistence for me is a similar word to resilience and grit. Persistence means you're trying you're never giving up. You're always overcoming difficulties and challenges, and you're never getting put off by challenge. So you're persisting. You keep going no matter what. So that's what drives you to always want to develop and improve and challenge yourself, and always be outside your comfort zone and be in your stress zone. And for me, persisting brings about a whole range of really positive life skills. So when you're driving and you're trying to develop yourself, you've got to ask questions. You've got to be inquisitive. You've got to be curious. So once you've developed a growth mindset and a persisting, resilient mindset, be curious, be inquisitive, ask the right questions to guide you in whichever direction you want to be. Do you want to be a football coach? Do you want to be a futsal coach? Do you want to be a coach educator? Do you want to work in a different sport? What do you want to do with your life? And that's the curiosity bit. So the persistence is the resilient attitude to want to achieve the best that you can. The curiosity is finding out the little niche, the little pathway that's going to be specific to you. And I think it's a really, really nice quote that summarizes the pathway of a coach, of a player, and of anyone really, in whatever sort of pathway of career or life they want to pursue.
What was that podcast again?
It's the Gold Dust Podcast.
Who's it by?
It's by a father and son duo that run the podcast, called Keith and David Mayer. So Keith was on my Advanced Youth Award 5 years ago. Brilliant coach, been coaching for a long time, works for Liverpool at the moment. He's a coach educator and a tutor, best-selling author with the books that he's released with his son David. And they have these real snappy little gold nugget quotes throughout their podcast. And they get some great guests on as well. And that was one that's really stuck with me, of persistence drives us, curiosity guides us.
I like that a lot. So the other one you said was the ABC of player development.
Yeah.
So what does that mean?
Yeah, so the ABC of player development. So I like to try and use acronyms wherever possible. And I think learning in threes is a great way to learn. Some of the most best-selling children's books, for example, are done based upon threes, like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, Three Little Pigs, for example. It's how we learn. It's how we remember and recall information. So
Three blind mice.
Sorry?
Three blind mice.
Three lines. There you go. Quite topical at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're spot on. So I think to have these little snappy acronyms and phrases, they're easy for us to remember, and they're hopefully easier for the kids to remember as well. So the A stands for being accountable. So with young players, can you promote a feeling of them being accountable? So quite often the case with very young players is when something goes wrong, who's the first person they blame? It's going to be someone else. It's going to be
Yeah.
the referee. It's going to
We
be,
teach them that, don't we?
yeah, that's true though. They're going to blame a teammate. They're going to blame an opponent, the weather, the pitch, the boots they're wearing, the football. They're going to blame external factors. So being accountable is always looking at yourself first. And I think that applies to us as coaches as well. So if a session hasn't gone the way we'd like to have done when we planned it, let us be accountable first. Let us think, what could we have done better within that session to make it a more positive experience for the kids. But for the kids themselves, yeah, the only person that you can control is yourself. So be accountable for when things go well and when perhaps they don't go quite so well. The B stands for better decision makers. So going back to what we said a minute ago about the different types of practice, I would always try and promote game insight, game craft practices, random practices when there's bundles of problems to solve, masses of decisions to make, because that's the game. It's an invasion game, football, isn't it? One team against another. It's a territorial invasion game. It's directional. You're trying to attack a particular direction. You're trying to defend a particular zone of the pitch, and it's a team sport. So decisions in football and in team sports is massive. It's prevalent in all those sports. So B, better decision makers. And then the C stands for courageous, just being brave. And that's not just being brave on the pitch, that's being brave off the pitch as well. So being brave on the pitch doesn't always have to mean being aggressive and being strong or flying into tackles and approaching it in that way. Courageous could be, can you receive the ball when you're marked by 3 players? Can you receive the ball in tight parts of the pitch? Can you want to get on the ball when your team's 1-0 down and there's 2 minutes left on the clock and you want to make a difference and try and get your team back in the game? It's that courageousness as well. So ABC, just a nice little way to remember. And I think it covers a vast range of traits to try and promote in young people as well.
So you spent a bit of time working on a future game, is that right?
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Yeah, that was in my second year working for the FA. So what the programme did was link into Brunel University, and I was working in a team of 6 for the Essex-based team. So what I did was, I think there was probably 8 of us that were chosen from 8 different regions of the country throughout the programme. I was the one selected from the Essex team, and it was to meet up in Leicester, I think on a bi-weekly basis or a monthly basis. It ended up becoming, and it was to discuss coaching behaviours, coaching styles, how to interact with players, how to work age appropriately with different groups, how to pose questions, how to breed creativity in children, and with the other cohort of coaches across the different counties, along with we had a professor from Brunel University who led the programme. And it wasn't a case of writing a load of sessions out. It was the how bit, not the what bit of the session. It was how to develop the sessions and what sort of practices were going to, over a long period of time, benefit those in grassroots football and ultimately those in academy football as well. And it was the precursor to the future game document being compiled and put together. It was all almost like the background work that went beforehand. And it was really, really enjoyable. We spoke about a vast range of different things, all the different coaching behaviours, from the benefits of command style, because it still has a benefit to some extent when you're being quite dictatorial, but to a lesser extent perhaps to the divergent way of thinking. So posing questions of kids when there's multiple ways to solve a problem, different solutions to the same problem, getting kids peer reviewing. So we called it reciprocal learning. So getting the kids to work in pairs and pose questions of each other and provide feedback to each other. So it was very much promoting the idea of coaching being quite player-led and less about the coach and more about the kids.
So you mentioned the importance of relationships. Now, I've got the future game up here on the shelf next to me. I think it's fantastic. I love the insight in it. If relationships are potentially even more important than the type of exercise we do, what is it that we need to do more of as coaches, as governing bodies, as clubs, to help foster relationships between coaches and kids, because we all know that a lot of times if you take school for the example, there'll be subjects that you'd like no matter who taught them because you just liked it. So PE, I think you could have the worst teacher and still enjoy PE. And then there are other subjects that you would always find boring, and that'll be different from person to person. And there'll be some subjects where you're kind of on the fence. Like one year you've got a really good teacher, another year you've got a boring or strict teacher and you don't like the lesson, but you could be open to the subject with a better teacher. Despite the future game being brilliant for the content related to drills, topics, exercises, and all its coaching information, if relationships are so important, what can we do?
Yeah, I think going back to school, like you said, is quite a good way to start, because I don't necessarily remember a lot of the content of the lessons and the subject matter, but I remember the teachers. I remember what their personalities were like. And there's another lovely quote I like with that. People will often forget what you said. People will often forget what you did, but they'll never forget how they made you feel. And over time, I can remember my favourite teacher was my PE teacher, Mr. Farrington. His name was very military with the way that he wanted to get us working in PE lessons. I can picture him now in the coldest parts of like November, December, January, to be cycling to school on his mountain bike, shorts, t-shirt, and it's snowing, it's icy cold conditions. But I remember the way that he made me feel, because he opened my eyes as to what it took to be a teacher, what it took to be a man, and not hiding from criticism because some kids didn't like the way that he taught. But I really enjoyed that style and that way of teaching that he promoted. And he was very, very much a people person as well. So I'd spend time and ask him about PE, because at that point I was quite keen on becoming a PE teacher. And he gave up a lot of time, not just during lessons, but after lessons as well. And I've never forgotten that. So for me, learning about building relationships should be a massive part of the FA learning pathway. And I've been fortunate enough to go on the FA Advanced Youth Award. I did that in 2017. And a massive part of that is about developing rapport, building strong bonds with parents and young people, developing relationships. Because for me, coaching is the ability to connect and communicate. And that's nothing to do with X's and O's and tactics and strategy. It's about getting to know people. And another one I like is always try and connect before you correct. So if you're working with a new group, for example, at the start of the season, I would never try and step in and try and correct everything straight away. I'd try and connect with the kids first. I'd try and find out about them. I'd ask about what they do at school, what their favourite subjects are, what their parents' names are, what their parents do for a job, if they've got any siblings, what their hobbies are. Almost all the things away from kicking a football round at training, and nothing to do with football, all the non-football bits. And I find that only then, when you develop those strong bonds, do you get to know the kids properly, and then they develop a sense of trust within you, and that then allows you to go and develop them from a coaching perspective. So yeah, I'd say it's about how people make you feel over time, not about what they say or do. And connecting and communicating is integral to being a good coach.
You made me think back to a physics teacher that we had, and in terms of connecting, he would be the least strict. As teenagers would mess around and get in trouble, and he would always be the one who was most reluctant to hand out any kind of serious punishment. But on top of that, he told us once that he used to design missiles for the Navy. So now suddenly, as teenagers, you are fascinated. Have you blown stuff up? And there'd be some lessons where we're talking about something boring like an electrical circuit, and then someone would ask a question along the lines of, how big is the universe? And he'd drop everything, get out the board, and start telling us all sorts of really interesting things about everything to do with astronomy. And we'd be on the edge of our seats laughing at. We wouldn't learn what was on the curriculum. We wouldn't do any of that stuff. But what he did was he fostered the curiosity within us. And he was also very, very good at taking popular science fiction movies and telling you what was real and what wasn't. And so now that was a far better way of teaching physics because we could relate to it. We were interested in it. So he got our attention. He met us on our level. And they say things like, you know that scene in Independence Day where the ship blows up the White House? Yeah. Wouldn't need to do that. What? No, all it needed to do is just hover above Washington and it would destroy all the buildings through thrust. What do you mean? Well, because it's a huge object, right? It's quarter the size of the moon, potentially, or something like that. So the thrust it would use to keep itself levitating off the ground, it's going to crush everything beneath it. Wow! So then our lesson that day became figuring out how long it would take the aliens to travel from the other side of the galaxy to Earth based on what was in the movie. And that reminds me a lot of the scenarios that we would paint in our football sessions. So yes, we are now Inter Milan trying to defend a lead away at Barcelona in the Champions League. We're now in that, and same with this teacher. We're not trying to sort out meaningless equations. We're trying to figure out how the aliens from Independence Day would blow up the Earth. Far more interesting, and it gets our attention, and it then provokes discussion because after the lesson, we're now still talking about this kind of stuff, and we're now going off on our tangents. That's developed that curiosity. Whereas I think the way that a lot of this stuff is taught in school is similar to your typical line drills. You run around the cones. I mean,
memory test.
Yes, pretty much. So I better start asking you a few questions about what it's like to work in academy football, because a lot of people are listening to this wanting to be in those positions. And one of the biggest draws of the people that are on these podcasts is for the listener to kind of mine them for information. I want to be where you've been. How do I get there? Is the mindset. And so let's just start from the beginning. It is my ambition. Let's say I'm 22, just finished university, and I've done a bachelor's degree in a sports course. I want to work in a Premier League academy. How do I get there?
Wow. Tough. It's a really tough journey. It's a really tough pathway, even more so now. I think when you're growing up, and I think about this every so often, if I were to go back in a time machine and talk to my younger self as I was starting my journey, what would I say to myself? And there's a couple of things really what I would say. I would say things along the line of it's massively important for me to listen more than you talk. I think when you talk, at any age, you're only ever saying things that you already know. You're not going to talk about things that you don't know. That's that unconscious incompetence, isn't it? So listen more than you talk, and learn from everybody. I've learned from so many people, whether that's coaches or teachers or parents of players themselves, and you're not always learning because that's something that you think, oh, I can pick up on that, and that I might integrate that into the way that I want to behave and teach and coach. It might be something that you think, oh, I never want to coach like that. I never want to teach like that. So you can learn from everybody, whether that's something that you want to take on or not. So I'd say that listening as you grow up is key. Role modeling the coaches that you admire and respect, asking questions, actively listening to the answers. I think I notice this a lot when I speak to people, that if you ask them a question, if they ask you a question, and I see this with coaches, with kids as well, they don't give the kids time to answer. They'll ask a question, and within a couple of seconds, they're answering it. Give people time. So again, a piece of advice for a young coach is that when you're asking questions of people, listen actively to the answers, work on your communication skills. And I know all these things might not be anything to do with actual academies as such, but it's all the life skills and the personality traits that will help you become more confident and self-aware. From a more football specific perspective, I gave up 4 years of my time voluntary. I worked part-time. I worked antisocial hours. I worked weekends. I gave up family time when I was younger because it was the career I wanted to pursue. And I still do to a certain extent now, because it's just the career and the type of work that you do in football. You're working when people aren't. So you've got to be prepared to give up your time. You've got to be prepared to work really, really hard. As I grew up, I got so many no's from people and so many rejections from clubs that I was trying to sort of find out more information from, or do voluntary work or part-time work for. So again, advice to younger coaches: be prepared that you can have far, far many more rejections and disappointments than you are successes, and you've got to be able to deal with that. But one thing I've learned is that I don't call it a rejection anymore. I call it a redirection now, because if that's someone saying no to you, it's for, ultimately, over the long term, it's for the right reasons. That role, that job perhaps wasn't for you. So now it's redirecting you to think and prioritize and go somewhere else. Yeah, I think overcoming obstacles and facing challenges and dealing with those redirections is part of growing up. And particularly for a young coach, be prepared to work part-time, be prepared to support other age groups. And when I got my fortunate break, I was part-time at Southend. I remember getting a phone call to offer me the full-time position. I was working as a tutor full-time and working for Southend part-time. I took a pay cut. I took a pay cut to get that full-time position. So I sacrificed money and a salary quite significantly, because that was the career I wanted to pursue, because I looked at it over the long term, and that I thought Southend Category 3 could lead ultimately, and it did, to a Category 1 football club, and it did in Arsenal. But I didn't think short term with the money. I thought long term over time, and where it might end up being as far as a progression within my career. And it did, it helped with that. So you've got to sacrifice. I think hard work and sacrifice is a key part of growing up as a young coach if you want to reach the top.
What have been some of the most beneficial learning experiences, whether it's courses or working with any particular people or teams, that prepared you to get the role at Arsenal?
So what were the key life challenges, did you say, sorry?
What were the lessons that prepared you best for the role at Arsenal? So whether it was going on a course, whether it was a job, whether it was working with a colleague or a mentor, what best prepared you for the role at Arsenal?
If I'm being honest, I don't think I was overly prepared. And I think I had to learn very quickly in the job when I started. If I think about what my full-time work was like at Southend and my day-to-day at Southend, you're there pretty much every day, pretty much all day, every day. And a lot of the work you do isn't necessarily to do with football. So I'd have to go and do things like take the kit over to the stadium to be washed, go and collect referee money for the weekend. Once the kit was ready, organise it all and bag it up. I'd have to go and sweep the changing rooms. I'd have to go and clean various parts of the building. And then to link that into the football bit, then you've got to look after 5 different age groups. You've got to manage 5 different sets of coaches and support staff. You've got all the players to oversee, all the parents to look after. So when I then went to Arsenal, all of those things I've just mentioned, there were full-time members of staff doing those already. So there was a full-time kit man. There was a full-time fixtures and logistics administrator. There was full-time safeguarding, full-time recruitment, full-time analysis, full-time education. So I was in a mindset of I've got to do all these other little things to make up my work, but I end up doing too much, because they say to me, Paul, you don't need to do that. You don't need to go and sort the kit out. The kit man does that for you. You haven't got to go and move the goals. The groundsmen do that for you. You just got to tell them where you want them for your sessions. So as far as learning, and what put me in a good position to move from one lower league club to a Premier League club, I had to learn that almost on the job itself, and it was really overwhelming to start, because I had to almost take back and step back as to how much work I needed to do. But the benefit of that was that you could focus purely on the football bit and working with the kids, and intentionally working with them one-to-one. And you could tailor programs far more specifically for kids at that level of football club than you could at a lower end football club, because you've got more time to do it, and you've got more specific members of staff working in those intentional departments that can help that particular player. So nothing really put me in a position to know what to expect from one club to the next. I just had to learn it almost on the job, I'd say.
Do you feel better prepared for the next time this kind of role comes around?
100%. Yeah, because I've worked my way up. I've done all those things I said, and I enjoyed those things at Southend. I enjoyed having to do all those tasks and those duties that made up being a full-time person, because I just enjoyed the hard work, and I'd enjoyed the outcome of having achieved those things and having the kit ready and making the change rooms look nice. So, for instance, on a Sunday after all the players had gone from the games that morning, I'd have to make sure that the building was clean, the change rooms were swept, because first thing Monday morning, the first team come in. So I'd want it to look presentable for those guys and the first team manager coming in to train first thing Monday morning. So, yeah, I just think the work that I've done at lower end clubs has really helped me, And now that I've gone and worked at a top Premier League club, I've almost got both ends catered for now. I've got all that hard work at a category 3, and I've got all that really football specific work in the bank and on my CV through working at a top Premier League, internationally renowned football club as well. So that pathway that I've taken has allowed me to learn an awful lot about what it means to be full-time in football.
So from a player's point of view, what's the difference between, say, category 1 and category 3? Is it ability? Is it attitude? Is it a range of factors?
It's an awful lot. Yeah, I'd say it's expectation, it's pressure. Those are the almost intangible things, I think, that having worked at both types of club are quite sort of prevalent in my mind when I think about it. It's an awful lot of pressure on these kids at these top clubs. And often the case is that pressure doesn't always come from the football club itself. A lot of it does come from the parents' expectations. I mean, Arsenal is such a world-renowned football club, and if you've got a young 8 or 9-year-old whose friends and school teachers, and of course whose parents know that that's who they represent and who they play for, it's an awful lot of pressure on these kids. So one thing that I really took on board was just trying to calm that way of thinking down and try and promote the idea that it's a long-term journey. These kids that I work with, 8, 9, 10 years of age, this could be a 10, 12-year journey before they end up playing anything near first-team football. And the likelihood is of them representing Arsenal is so minimal. So you've got to make that journey as enjoyable and as positive as possible. So I'd say the things that stand out for me would be the expectation on the players, the pressure that external people perhaps put on the players. But as far as the players themselves, of course, the ability of them is at the very top end. These are highest technical ability players in the country. These are players that have got unbelievable game knowledge at a very young age. So they're very perceptive, and these kids love watching football for the most part, and their game understanding is at a very high level. So it's very marked and a very stark contrast in my mind about when I picture, with all due respect to the Southend standard of play, which was very good. When you go to somewhere like Arsenal, it's another level completely. So there are vast differences on the pitch and off the pitch, I'd say.
Of course, when you're at Arsenal as a kid, you also have to factor in, you're not just competing with those in your age group and age groups around you for first team, you're competing with every kid in the world, because a big club like that is going to look everywhere to try and find a talent that's going to help them win trophies. And how do you get the kids to kind of come to terms with that? You're not just trying to graduate to the 16s, to the 18s, to the or to the reserves, to the first team. You're also trying to be better than the best kids in Spain, better than best kids in France, Germany, Italy, wherever else it might be. If you want to get to there, you can't just be the biggest fish in this pond. You've got to be one of the biggest fishes in all of the ponds.
Yeah, I think that comes more so when they reach the latter ends of the academy system. So when they get into 15s and 16s, and clubs such as Arsenal will sometimes bring in players of that age from overseas. I think Fabregas came to Arsenal when he was 15 from Spain. So that's an age group that you're more likely going to get players over from overseas to your country. And then the comparison becomes more of a conversation and more of a dialogue. With the younger ones, I don't think we should ever talk in those terms, really. I think the longest journeys start with the smallest steps. So I'm never going to talk to, or very rarely talk to, an 8 or 9-year-old about what the first team looks like, because it's so far away, and what other kids in other countries look like. We see that when we go on tour. So I've been to Germany, France, Spain. We've played against Juventus, Bayern Munich, Benfica, Porto, Milan. So that's a great chance for them to compare themselves against their 9s and 10s peers, if you like, overseas. But as far as when we're working with them here, I think it's just about bettering themselves every day. And it's those real small steps, and only controlling what they can control. They can't control the Barcelona's academy. They can't control Juventus's academy. They've got no idea about what those guys do and what those players are like over the course of a season. They might see snippets of it, like I say, when they go on tour. But it's all about being the best person they can be, and the best version of themselves, and bettering themselves individually. I think comparison and comparing yourself to others is a dangerous thing to do with young players.
So, without putting anybody down, well, I'm not asking you to do that anyway. What's the difference in coaching between Category 1 and Category 3?
I don't think there's a real single answer to that. I've seen ego at both ends. I've seen egotistical coaches at Category 3, Category 2, and Category 1. I've seen some very, very good coaches that are brilliant, age-appropriate practitioners at those categories as well. I would never, ever say that the best coaches are at Category 1, and the lesser coaches, less knowledgeable, less experienced coaches, are at Category 3. I've seen some Category 3 coaches that, in my opinion, are far better coaches overall in many areas than perhaps some Cat 1 coaches that I've seen. It just differs from club to club. I don't think there's a definitive answer on it. I think working for a Cat 1 sometimes could be you just in the right place at the right time regarding recruitment, of you having that opportunity. You've been on a course with a person that takes a shine to you. They work for that Cat 1 club, and they take you with them whenever they move. I've seen that before as well. Yeah, I don't think there's a definitive answer with that one at all, because I've seen good and bad at both, really.
Being in the right place at the right time is unfortunately still a huge part of how you make it in the career. And I forget which book it was, but one of the Malcolm Gladwell books, we talked about the success of Bill Gates and how he's hardworking, he's got lots of perseverance, he's very clever, he's very driven, he's all of those things. But so were millions of others. So what separated him? Well, it happened to be that he lived within walking distance of a university that happened to have one of the only supercomputers at the time that was available to the public. So him and his mates used to go down there and practice their coding for several hours a day. Now, how many other young Bill Gates were there across the country that didn't live within walking distance of a supercomputer that let people in? And I think it's the same thing with kids. We always talk about, well, how many Messis have we had that were cut from the team because they were too short, or how many Ronaldinhos did we have that the parents used to scream at them to get rid of it, kick it out, stop doing that there? How many of those players have we had? And same with coaches. You hear so many coaches who've got jobs because, just as you said, they might have been on a course, sat next to some ex-pro, and for 2-3 weeks, every day they're interacting. I like you. I'm going back to my club now. We've got a position. Do you want to come? And the way that you sat down in those courses, sometimes it's just done on, the assessors would already put your names out for you. And there might have been 3 or 4 other very capable coaches in that room who, if they happened to be sat next to that ex-pro, would also have hit it off, would also have impressed them, and they would also have been asked. But I suppose a lot of it is also that survivorship bias, isn't it? I made it, here's my story. Well, there were thousands who were just like you who didn't make it. Why?
Yeah, it's really true. I don't know if you know the story of Matthew Syed, who in this country, he was an Olympic table tennis player, that's the right word. And he's written some fantastic books and does journalism as well from a sport background. And when he was a child growing up, he was the only person or only family in their street, I think, that got a table tennis table in their, put it in their garage, I believe. And so they practiced all the time. But then it became a bit of a hub and a bit of a community. And so over that period when he became a professional player, they looked at the stats growing up of where these players came from. And I think not coincidentally, a lot of the players that became professionals lived in the same village as him or on the same street as him, just because they had access to the table. And I think they had another venue they went to and practiced, and there were some coaches that lived in the area. So that's just being fortunate that you were born in the right area with the right facilities, given the right affordances and opportunities, and then developed your craft in that way. But you might have potential fantastic table tennis players in other parts of the country, or footballers, for example, that just don't have that access and don't have that good fortune to go through a pathway that ends up becoming a professional. So there is fortune, I think, that comes with it as well.
So that was in the book Bounce, and I'm pretty sure that you mentioned he had a PE teacher who was an ex-top table tennis player, and he only had access to that PE teacher because he went to that school. And if he lived a couple of streets over, he's in a different catchment area, goes to a different school, never meets that teacher. And you see, I love the phrase that talent is distributed equally, but opportunity is not. And we need to be far better at getting that out there for people. It is other book, we've done quite a few, but the one Black Box Thinking is incredible. And I think that should be mandatory reading for a lot of coaches, because it goes into detail of how you make silly mistakes in innocuous moments, what the thought processes are when you're under pressure. It's brilliant. And I talked a lot about the pilot Sully, played by Tom Hanks in that movie, the plane that crashed into the Hudson River. Just brilliant. And of course, that's life and death situation, and football, as much as we think it is, it's not really life and death, but when you're under pressure, a lot of the thought processes are very similar. So I recommend that book highly to anyone that would want to expand their knowledge.
Yeah, 100%. It's an excellent book. Yeah, spot on with your assessment of it. Yeah.
So you've been very, very generous with your time today. I'd like to thank you very much, and just ask you, what are your plans and ambitions for next?
Yeah, good question. So obviously I've had the difficult period that I've had with coming out of my previous club. So I'm looking really to find out what my next movement's going to be, and I'm very confident in my own ability. I've had some brilliant experiences. I've got a very, very top end CV now, in my own opinion, having had the good fortune to go through the courses and experience the experiences that I've had. So I'm looking at my next job, whatever that might be. I'm open-minded. I'm hopeful that's going to be in football, but I love educating. I love working with coaches, as we've discussed throughout this podcast. I love working with young people. So I'm open-minded as to whatever it might be next. And so I'm networking efficiently with lots of people, speaking to people like yourself. So I appreciate your time and support at the moment, Will. So yeah, I'm just open-minded and excited as to what might happen next.
Well, best of luck to you. I'm sure that whoever gets you is going to be very, very fortunate to have someone so knowledgeable and so highly skilled. I've learned a lot from talking to you, and I hope that all of our listeners are able to pick up lots of fantastic pearls of wisdom from you.
Yeah, really appreciate your time. You do a great job with the platform that you run, and you're supporting hundreds and hundreds of coaches like myself that want to better themselves and develop. And people like myself really appreciate your help.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, I can only take credit for the last couple of months. It's all down to Matt and the fantastic work he's been doing for years. He's built something brilliant, and I think we can use this to help a lot of people. So massive appreciation to what he's done, and thank you for people like yourself that are coming on, being candid and sharing your expertise, because it's coaches are the best thieves, aren't we? And that's how we learn and grow.
Coaches are the best thieves. Yeah, I think Pep Guardiola once famously said that, and he's spot on.
Yes, he's also acknowledged all the time that he only wins because he gets good players, which I think it's one of the biggest accusations. He only wins because he's got good players. And he said, yes, that's why I win, because I get good players. But then he's the one that buys the good players, whereas the other clubs also have money and don't buy those same good players.
But without want to get into too much detail, he's one of the few coaches that makes players better as well. And the top end players, he makes them even better, and that's why he's the best.
Biggest compliment to a coach, and so many players have said that. They say things like, just one pre-season with him, I've learned more about football in the last couple of months than I've learned in my entire life.
Yeah.
I think, wow, I want someone to talk about me like that one day.
It's never too late, Will.
Fingers crossed. All right, well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks,
and really, really enjoyable talking to you. That's another episode done. Thank you very much for coming on, Paul. Really, really enjoy talking to fantastic people. There's a lot of insight, a lot of interesting stories. If you'd like to share your journey, then get in touch, come on. Or if you can recommend anyone that is just as interesting that we can learn from, put us in touch and we'll get them on the pod. Thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.